Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. So, inshallah, in this lesson, we'll be analyzing the poem A Poison Tree, which is a poem in Songs of Experience. I was angry with my friend. I told my wrath did end. And I was angry with my foe. I told it not, my wrath did grow. And I watered in fears night and morning with my tears, and I sunned it with smiles and with soft deceitful wiles. And it grew both day and night, till it bore an apple bright, and my foe beheld it shine, and he knew that it was mine. And into my garden stole when the night had veiled the pole. In the morning, glad I see my foe outstretched beneath the sea. So, the speaker of the poem actually details two different approaches to anger. In the first, openly talking about anger um, is presented as a way of moving past it. And in the second, the speaker outlines the danger of keeping anger within. So the poem uses an extended metaphor to describe the speaker's anger as growing into a tree that bears poisonous apples. So the speaker's enemy then eats an apple from the tree and then dies. The poem is generally interpreted as an allegory for the danger of bottling up emotions and how doing so leads to a cycle of negativity and even violence. So, with this, we're going to begin with the analysis of the poem. Let me read the first two lines first. I was angry with my friend and I told my wrath did end. So the first two lines present the poem's first of two distinct scenarios. Those scenarios दिए थे ना, okay ना, of handling the anger. So in the first two lines, one of the scenarios has been given. So over here, the speaker relates what happened when the speaker talked about the anger that he was feeling towards a friend. And talking about the anger made it go away. So the straightforward simplicity of these lines suggests the ease with which the anger disappeared and thus presents being open and honest as an extremely effective antidote to anger and wrath. Of course, in this scenario, the speaker's anger is directed towards a friend, someone with whom the speaker is familiar and apparently already likes. So this raises the question of whether friendship is a prerequisite for open communication, whether the speaker was able to discuss his or her problem and in doing so end it only because the speaker was approaching a friend. However, the word friend here suggests a wider idea about how people relate to each other, especially in moments of anger. Friendship, family bonds, and shared understanding help people talk things through, which reduces conflict and strengthens their relationships. In this sense, the speaker showing their anger openly could actually turn the other person into a friend. The shortness of this situation reflects how simple and quick this idea is. The part of the poem effectively ends by this part of the poem, यानी जो first scenario है, this effectively ends in the first two lines only, which mirrors how quickly the speaker's anger disappears. So, because the anger ends early, it does not have time to grow into the poison tree that appears later in the poem. Since the reader already knows from the title that a poison tree will develop, these opening lines feel like a picture of an innocent and peaceful state of humanity before the biblical fall of man. It suggests an ideal condition where people are naturally open and honest, and the speaker hints that this is how humans should be, even though they are not. The simplicity of these two lines is also sonically, यानी कि sound wise, satisfying to the reader, with the perfect rhyme of friend and the end stop at line 2, making it feel as though the poem could almost end right here. The meter, which shifts from trochees in line 1 to iams in line 2 also has an easy sing-song like quality that further reflects its simplicity with the final stress on end, again suggesting how easy it would be for people to resolve or end their issues if only they spoke up about their feelings. Okay, so look over here. Over here, if you're going to look at this, the first stanza, I was angry. So look at the stresses over here. So it is beginning with stress and unstressed. So the pattern is stress and unstressed, which is strokey. And the second line is following the pattern of what? The pattern of iambic meter. So the stress changes over here, unstressed and then stress. Okay. So it is so simple. Okay. And everything, it seems as if the poem can actually end over here because everything has ended. Except this is a poem of experience, not idealism. So the shortness of this first scenario and the fact that it is followed by another 14 lines implies that the world in actuality is obviously not like this first scenario. Accordingly, the reader knows that the poem must move away from its peaceful beginnings. With this, we move on to the next two lines. I was angry with my foe, I told it not, and my wrath did grow. So, lines 3 and 4 present the second and main scenario of the poem. Here, the speaker recounts being angry with an enemy rather than a friend. Whereas in the first scenario, the speaker spoke up about this anger. This time, the speaker did not, which caused that anger to grow. In this first stanza, then, the speaker is setting out two antithetical or parallel situations, demonstrating what happens with each course of action. That is, talking about anger or not talking about anger and letting it fester. So it is notable that these lines do not discuss the particulars of why the speaker was angry. Instead, the poem is intended as a fable like morality tale with two clear options and consequences. The why doesn't matter over here. What matters is how the speaker deals with the anger that he feels. The speaker has already described the better way of dealing with anger in the first two lines of the poem. Trying to suppress negative emotions is not helpful, suggests the poem, and instead causes them to grow. The use of this word grow implies that anger has potential to increase if not dealt with appropriately. The word grow also begins to set up the extended metaphor of the tree that will be fleshed out throughout the rest of the poem. देखो, whatever the literary devices I'm sharing right now, please keep them in your mind and understand them because later on I'm not going to be dealing with them with so much depth. Okay. So the constructions of line 3 and 4 matches that of the first two lines exactly. Okay. जैसे कि this one here. So I was angry. Look again, this is strokey. Okay. And the way ये गलत आ गया. This is strokey. Okay. And this is unstressed and stress. Again, the first, the third line is again trokey. And the fourth line is again uh, iambic. Okay. So it is resembling. Okay. Exactly the same. Okay. So क्यों है भाई trochee and then iambic over here trochee and then iambic again. Okay, so the story is different over here because this is going to move on till the end of the क्या कहते हैं, till the end of the poem. Okay, this scenario, the second scenario in which the person was angry and did not talk to his foe or his enemy. Okay, so the anger is going to grow and it is going to keep growing. So what happens in iambic, that the final stress is the final foot is stressed. So the growth is being stressed over here. It is going to keep growing. Okay, na? Understood? Okay. Then, if we're going to look at the F sound over here with my friend and foe. Okay, na? Friend and foe. This is an alliteration. तो दिस फर्दर रिफ्लेक्ट्स दिस यूज ऑफ पैरेललिज्म. देखो एक जैसा बीटर है तो दिस इज पैरेललिज्म, आइडिया भी स्ट्रक्चर भी एक जैसा है तो दिस इज पैरेललिज्म, which creates the sense that there is a clear choice between telling anger or keeping it within. Okay, so here it is also worth noting that Blake's original title for the poem was Christian forbearance. ये याद रखने वाली बात है. ओके, द ओरिजिनल टाइटल फॉर दिस पोयम वाज क्रिश्चियन forbearance. Okay. Okay, though he later changed the title, the original does suggest that the poem's moral stance towards anger, that it should be revealed and let go rather than held close and suppressed, is embedded in the Christian tradition of turning the other cheek. In fact, the title that Blake eventually did use for the poem, A Poison Tree, has a religious allusion that also reinforces this interpretation. The tree makes readers think of the tree of knowledge in the biblical Garden of Eden, eating from which introduced sin into the world. So, taken together, this all suggests that the speaker is presenting the first scenario, yani ki the scenario of speaking up, as correct and moral, and the second scenario, letting anger fester with sin. जो कि sin किससे हुआ था? Poison tree का fruit खा के हुआ था. Okay, with this we move on to the second stanza now. And I watered it in fears, night and morning with my tears, and I sunned it with smiles and with soft deceitful wiles. So this whole stanza shows the speaker's cultivation of his anger. Here, the metaphor implied by the poem's title is made apparent as the speaker suggests that anger grows as would a plant, yani ke tree in a garden. The speaker watered it in tears, sunned it with smiles. So it is important that the poison tree requires the speaker's active engagement with careful effort going into helping it to grow. The speaker is not passive bystander, but rather clearly contributing to the growth of this anger. Here you are going to find anaphora over here, anaphora of and, and. Of the repeated ands in these lines creates a list-like quality, highlighting the active steps the speaker takes in tending to his angry garden. Lines 5 and 6 present clear negative emotions that are an integral part of the maintenance of the tree and by extension of anger itself. The tree feeds off other negative emotions such as fear and despair. These are the fuel that the tree needs in order to live and get bigger. The use of tears lends literal weight to the metaphor as trees need water in order to survive. These details also show the obsessive care that the speaker has to show to the anger tree, contrasting with the simplicity of the first scenario in which the speaker talked about his anger and it immediately disappeared. Then lines 7 and 8, yani ke the last two lines of the second stanza, and I sunned it with smiles and with soft deceitful wiles, they develop a more complex line of thought. Here, the speaker uses a more positive emotion, happiness, as shown by smiles, to provide energy to help the tree grow. This shows that anger has corrupted what normally be taken as a sign of compassion and kinship, that these are smiles that cannot be trusted. Perhaps these smiles are those that the speaker shows to the enemy, all the while harboring malicious thoughts that contradict what the speaker's face might show. This deception this is focused by the use of consonants in line 8. Consonants कौन सी है? The F sounds in soft and deceitful and make the vile acts of cunning and manipulation seem relatively harmless. यानी कि ये जो sounds हैं soft, ये किस लिए यूज हो रहे हैं? ये एक्ट्स ऑफ कनिंग और मैनिपुलेशन के लिए यूज हो रहे हैं। ओके, तो दीज ये सॉफ्ट साउंड्स हैं, जब भी तो ये डिसीटफुल है। ओके ना? तो दे मेक दीज एक्शंस ऑफ स्माइल्स to be to seem to look like as if they are harmless. फिर there is sibilance also in line 7 between sun and smiles. This creates a similar effect. So these deceitful wiles can also be interpreted as the lies and tricks that the speaker has to play on himself in order to keep such angry emotions suppressed. At the same time, the use of this extended metaphor of the tree also suggests that paradoxically, suppressed anger becomes an external, almost physical presence in the world. Though the speaker plays a clear role in helping the anger grow, the anger will eventually outgrow its creator and become independent. This idea suggests that anger may grow to the point that it is not clear why it started in the first place. Alternatively, anger may grow so large that resolving the initial issue that spurred such wrath is doing too little, too late. Next two lines are, and it grew both day and night till it bore an apple of bride. So these two lines of the poem further develop the growth of the tree, which seems to become more real as the poem goes on. The tree, the metaphorical growth of the tree क्या है? It is the metaphorical growth of the speaker's unchecked anger. This tree, यानी कि his unchecked anger, it feeds off the speaker's negative emotions. The use of day and night emphasizes the tree's continuous growth and also links back to line 6, which showed the daily cultivation performed by the speaker in service of the poison tree. Now, after so much growth in line 10, the tree develops fruit of its own. The apple is an allusion to the biblical story of Adam and Eve. In Genesis, Eve is tempted by the serpent, Satan, who's Satan in disguise, to eat the fruit from the tree of knowledge, despite having been explicitly forbidden from doing so by God. This act causes the fall of humankind from paradise and introduces sin into the world. So in the poem, anger itself is actually aligned with sin and a fall from grace. Yet, whereas in the biblical account, the forbidden fruit is external to humankind, in this poem, the apple is literally grown from within the speaker. The apple is the natural and organic development of the speaker's own suppressed anger. Okay, the end stops in lines 9 and 10. Slow down the reading. ओके, ये एंड स्टॉप क्या है? एक और लिटरेरी डिवाइस है। इट स्लो डाउन द रीडिंग। अगर आप देखेंगे इस पोयम के अंदर, तो ऑल द सेंटेंसेस, ऑल द वर्सेस आर एंड स्टॉप, यानी कि सबके एंड में कोई ना कोई पॉज आ रहा है। So they slow down the reading, making it feel like time is passing gradually. So this helps show the tree growing gradually as the reader takes longer to move through the lines. The consonants of the repeated B and P and T sounds makes the line slower and heavier. This gives them a strong and controlled feeling, reflecting the dangerous power of unchecked rage. The use of bright in line 10 suggests temptation, the light reflecting off the apple, making it seem appetizing even though it is a product of rage. By portraying the apple as attractive, the poem suggests that anger not only breeds more anger within the speaker, but is attractive to others as well. Anger is an alluring emotion that is all too easy to give in. Okay, the poem seems to suggest. Whether the growth of the poisonous apple is part of the speaker's intentional strategy or simply an accidental byproduct of the speaker's anger, it is unclear. To a degree, both may be true. Regardless, this anger has taken on a life of outside of the speaker and has begun to impact the world around it. Okay, let us now move on to the next four lines. And my foe beheld its shine, and he knew that it was mine, and into my garden stole when the night had veiled the pole. So these lines 11 till 14 shift the focus from the growth of the speaker's poison tree to the actions of the speaker's foe. Though these lines spread across two stanzas, they are linked in their focus on this unnamed enemy. No details are offered about who this enemy actually is, nor what the anger between the foe and the speaker is based on. This makes sense, as the poem is chiefly about the way anger snowballs beyond an initial emotion into a dangerous cycle of negativity. The lack of detail about the enemy reflects the way that the speaker's anger has outgrown its origins. In these lines, the foe sees the shiny apple on the tree and knows that it belongs to the speaker, presumably because it is in the latter's garden. The apple's tempting luminous toxicity, a reflection of anger's self perpetuating strength, has drawn the enemy towards it, encouraging conflict in order to reinforce the cycle of hatred. There is an element of jealousy too, suggestive of the way animosity towards others encourages possessiveness. These lines thus reflect the thematic content of lines 5 through 8, in that they further reveal how negativity breeds further negativity. But while lines 5 through 8 focused on how anger grows within an individual, these lines suggest how anger grows in the world. The anaphora again of the repeated ands, ye wale, and, okay. In these lines, further echoes lines 5 through 8, again creates a sense of inevitability about the way anger spreads. Line 13 creates, yani ki ye wali line, and into my garden stole, creates a feeling of suspicion and conflict. The speaker points out that the enemy has entered the speaker's garden, which is a personal and private space. On a larger allegorical level, this can represent how humans divide themselves into groups or nations, labeling others as friends or foes. The word stole not only means sneaking is quietly, but also suggests stealing, adding to the sense of distrust and tension. In line 14, the darkness of night helps a thief hide, but it also has a deeper meaning. The darkness represents how the speaker and the enemy cannot truly understand each other. Their anger clouds their thinking and stops them from feeling empathy. The pole likely refers to the North Star, which helps guide people. Its absence suggests a loss of moral direction and guidance. With this, we move on to the final two lines of the poem. In the morning, glad I see my foe outstretched beneath the tree. So these two lines bring the poem to its ending and shift into the present tense. This makes the message feel more immediate and important, not just something that happened in the past. The word glad is a bit unclear. It could describe the morning as in glad morning, though this word order is unusual today. More likely, It shows the speaker's own feeling of happiness when they see the enemy lying under the tree. The poem does not clearly say the enemy has died from eating the fruit, but this is strongly suggested by the title and the word outstretched, which makes the body seem lifeless. An illustration published with the poem also shows the enemy as dead. याद है ना William Blake's all the poems they came with an illustration. This raises the question of responsibility. Did the enemy cause their own death by giving in to temptation, or did the speaker's hidden anger lead to it? Either way, the speaker's happiness at this moment shows how anger can twist emotions. What started as smiles and soft, deceitful wiles has now turned into a disturbing kind of gladness based on someone else's suffering. If the enemy is dead, the poem ends with a dark warning. It shows how hidden anger can grow and lead to serious harm. What began as silence about wrath has ended in tragedy. More broadly, the poem suggests that when people hold on to anger and let it grow, it can lead to destructive and dangerous consequences. With this, we move on to the themes of the poem. There is only one theme, which is anger and suppressed emotion. In this poem, it shows that expressing anger openly can resolve it, while suppressing it leads to greater harm. When the speaker talks about anger, it disappears, but when it is hidden, it grows like a poisonous tree. This growing anger leads to deceit, hatred, and ultimately destruction, showing that unexpressed emotions can become dangerous. Overall, the poem warns that keeping anger inside can lead to serious consequences, while honest communication can prevent conflict. Now we move on to the symbols, and the only symbol present over here is the apple. The apple represents the result of hidden anger. When anger is not expressed, it grows and becomes harmful, eventually affecting others like a poison. The apple also shows how common this kind of anger is and alludes to the biblical fruit, suggesting that anger is both tempting and dangerous. Overall, it symbolizes how suppressed emotions can grow, spread, and lead to serious consequences. With this, we move on to the literary devices. The first literary device is anaphora, and we have already discussed about it, given all the details of it while giving the details of the poem. The next literary device is extended metaphor. इसके बारे में भी I've also talked. The poison tree is extended metaphor, which begins with the poem's title. The tree of the title is not a literal tree, but instead a symbolic manifestation, a metaphor of the speaker's unchecked anger. नेक्स्ट लिटरेरी डिवाइस इज पैरेललिज्म जिसकी बात रिमेंबर हमने पहले स्टैंजा के अंदर कर ली थी नेक्स्ट लिटरेरी डिवाइस इज सीजरा there are two moments of seizure in the poem caused by the midline commas in lines 2 and 4 first stanza के अंदर they are both part of the parallel construction present in the first stanza क्योंकि दोनों की construction एक जैसी है parallel है matching the sense of rhythm and timing in both sentences so that the speaker's choice is made all the more clear. The use of seizure allows for a sense of casualty between the speaker's choice and the following repercussions. यानी कि after lines 2 क्या बोलता है वो I told my wrath the seizure over here creates a brief pause after which the next logical stage can follow that after I told my wrath and telling leads to the wrath ending. Line 4 mirrors this with logical conclusion of when it is not told the wrath begins to grow. Next literary device is end stop. Remarkably, almost every line in the poem is end stop. Each one is marked by punctuation. Part of the effect of this technique is the sense of progressive growth through the poem, with each line appearing like a branch on the poison tree of the title. The longer that the speaker's anger is allowed to fester, the more branches appear, showing this externalized anger growing stronger. Lines 9 and 10 could easily be enjambed, for example. Okay, in fact, they would make more syntactical sense that way. क्या है एंड इट ग्रू बोथ डे एंड नाइट टिल इट बोर एन एप्पल ब्राइट. ये तो ज्यादा क्लियर लगेगी विद एंजॉयमेंट एंड विदाउट एंड स्टॉप. बट द पोइट्स चॉइस ऑफ एंड स्टॉप emphasizes the way in which the speaker's anger moves through different stages, as a tree does through its growth and seasons. Next literary device is epizeuxis. Epizeuxis occurs just once in the poem in line 2, with the immediate repetition of the phrase myriad. Lines 1 and 2 present the positive alternative to the poem's dark main scenario, relating an occasion when the speaker told their rat, that is, admitted it to their friend, and in doing so ended that wrath, as opposed to letting it grow into a poison tree. So the subtle use of epizeuxis here takes the sting out of the speaker's anger, as the repetition of the phrase emphasizes that it is now merely something to be talked about rather than a deep rooted emotion taking on a life of its own. Next literary device is polysyndeton. A significant proportion of a poison tree uses polysyndeton. Lines 5, 7, 8, 9, 11, 12, and 13. In other words, almost half of the poem's lines begin with an and. This polysyndeton emphasizes the step by step growth of the poison tree that is set in motion by suppression of the speaker's anger. Then next little device is sibilance, जिसके बारे में we have already talked about. With this, we move on to the form, meter, and rhyme scheme of this poem. Let us first talk about the form. So the poem has a simple structure of four quatrains, but it is also divided into two parts. The first two lines show how anger disappears when it is expressed, while the remaining lines show how anger grows when it is suppressed. So the longer second part reflects the growing anger through the extended metaphor of the poison tree. और जो फर्स्ट पार्ट है दैट इज ओनली comprised इन टू लाइंस, जिससे पता चल रहा है कि व्हेन वी आर गोइंग टू टेल अबाउट आवर एंगर it is going to simply end. And when we're not going to tell about it or talk about it and suppress it, so it is going to keep growing. That's why the second part is so large and the first part is very small. With this, we move on to the meter. The meter has a musical, almost nursery rhyme like sound, which makes the poem easy to remember. Technically, the poem mostly uses trochaic tetrameter, where each line has four beats that follow a stressed unstressed pattern. This rhythm feels strong and forceful, making the events in the poem seem unavoidable. However, most lines do not have the full eight syllables expected in trochaic tetrameter. Okay, instead, they have seven syllables because of catalexis. याद है catalexis? We've already talked about it. Okay, catalexis क्या होता है? When we क्या कहते हैं? When the final unstressed syllable is removed. For example, over here. अब इधर दिस वाज अनस्ट्रेस अनस्ट्रेस अनस्ट्रेस, तो इधर भी अनस्ट्रेस आना चाहिए था ना. So अनस्ट्रेस्ड अनस्ट्रेस्ड अनस्ट्रेस, दिस शुड आल्सो हैव बीन अनस्ट्रेस. ओके, बट इट इजंट. तो इससे क्या पता चला? दैट वन ऑफ द फाइनल अनस्ट्रेस्ड सिलेबल हैज बीन रिमूव्ड. सो द फर्स्ट फुट बिगिन विद अ stressed I, while the final foot consists of a stressed single syllable, friend. So the poem would read drastically differently with pure trochees, and each line would have considerably weaker sound. अगर उसके बाद अनस्ट्रेस्ड होगा। फॉर एग्जाम्पल इफ फ्रेंड वर रिप्लेस्ड विद ब्रदर, तो इसके अंदर क्या होगा? दैट ब्रदर ओवर हेयर द लास्ट वन वुड बी unstressed. So the extra unstressed syllable would make the line sound softer and less powerful. So the actual form gives the poem more energy and intensity, matching the speaker's anger. The missing final syllable also pushes one line into the next, just as the anger keeps growing. While the most lines follow this pattern, three lines, yani कि line 2, 4, and 16, use a different rhythm, which is iambic tetrameter with a regular unstressed stress pattern and full eight syllables. These lines feel more complete and balanced. So, in the first stanza, they help separate the two situations, expressing anger and hiding it. Okay. In the final line, my foe outstretched beneath the tree, the shift in the rhythm suggests finality, ending the poem with the image of the poison tree that grew from suppressed anger. Now we move on to the rhyme scheme, which is double A double B. It is very simple, and each quatrain consisting of two couplets rhyme double A double B. All of the rhymes are perfect rhymes, which together with the straightforward meter gives the poem an easy yet forceful nursery rhyme quality. The reason why the rhyme scheme is so simple, it highlights the poem's warning message and makes it easier to remember. Rhymes make words more memorable, and since this poem is meant to teach a lesson about anger, its message is designed to stay with the reader and influence how they behave in the future. With this, we end this analysis. I hope you have understood it. Please feel free to ask if there is any question.